Thank you for listening to my daddy's podcast.
Hey, don't let these tears fool you. There's all dog around this mug. I'm good.
Hey, what's going on, Who Dat Nation? It is yours truly, TJAY Jones. And yes, I am the host of the State of the Saints podcast. Thank you so much for checking out the State of the Saints podcast, where we talk New Orleans Saints. On this edition, we have a special guest with us here on the State of the Saints podcast, a friend to the show. Some of you have seen him on the show a few times. He's a two-time Super Bowl champion. And also you can catch him talking college football as well as NFL football on CBS Sports HQ. My friend, my buddy, Bryant McFadden. B-Mac, how you doing, man?
What's happening, TJ? First and foremost, man, I love the intro. I love the intro because you incorporated some bounce-type vibes to the music, the intro, showcasing your heritage, man, the culture. Number one, that's a big-time plus, man. So I love the intro. Thank you for the invitation.
Man, I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much for being here, man. It's always a pleasure to chop it up with you, talk a little bit about NFC South and Saints football. But let's go ahead and get started, man. This is always an exciting time. You know, the NFL schedule has come out. Fan bases now know what their team have to do in order for them to possibly win a division, make the playoffs, and get that ultimate goal, which is the Super Bowl. You look at the NFC South. They've been struggling over the last few years. A lot of people consider this as, a pretty weak division, but they're trying to turn it around. We'll go ahead and start with the New Orleans Saints. The New Orleans Saints finished 9-8 last season. They decided to move on from their offensive coordinator, Pete Carmichael. They bring in a new offensive coordinator, Clint Kubiak, and they're trying to do things a little bit different. B-Mac, what is your overall thoughts on the New Orleans Saints? And we'll start with Dennis Allen. What does Dennis Allen have to do to get the Saints back on track? It's been a while since they made the postseason.
I think I'll start right there, TJ. I think when you talk about the Saints, because it's not like this is a team that lacks talent on either side of the football, right? They have talent. The cupboard isn't bare there. It's about Dennis Allen. Dennis Allen, when you look at the entire NFC South, I think he is the coach that probably has the most pressure. He is the coach that probably hasn't reached the level of expectations based on the team he inherited, right? And when you look at what he's done as a defensive coordinator, clearly he's flashed in that position. But in totality as a head coach, he hasn't taken off. It's almost like he's kind of giving me, from the defensive side, Josh McDaniels-like vibes. Right? As a DC, as a coordinator, you really get high-level play. But when you're the man in charge over everything as a head coach, we see a drop-off when it comes to production. So for me, that's the biggest conundrum, I think, for the New Orleans Saints. What are you going to get from your head coach and Dennis Allen? Because it would be one thing if you lack talent, like the Carolina Panthers, who are trying to, rebuild and add talent. But no, you walked into a situation when Sean Payton left where it was more than a serviceable roster, right? And one guy I would like to highlight as well in regards to what can he give this season for the New Orleans Saints is Alvin Kamara.
Right.
Can Dennis Allen in this new offensive regime unlock lights Kamara action, as I call him? You got lights camera action. I go lights Kamara action. Can they unlock him? Right. Because I believe still to this day, even though he's older, TJ, Alvin Kamara is one of the best dual threat running backs in the National Football League.
Yeah.
But for some reason, since Sean Payton's left, we haven't seen that skill set take off. So can they get him going? Because I understand Derek Carr is very, very important. The quarterback is important. But if you want to get the best Derek Carr, if you want to get the best Chris Olave and the rest of the guys, get Kamara going.
Right.
You know, he's like the transmission for the car. I don't care how good an engine you got. I don't care how big an engine you got. If you don't have a transmission, you ain't going nowhere.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. When I look at it, I kind of look at the situation similar to that of Chris McCaffrey in Carolina. Like the last few years in Carolina, it seemed like Chris McCaffrey was starting to wind down. The 49ers make a trade. He goes to the San Francisco 49ers, and it almost like he had a resurgence of his career. And when I talk to Saints fans, some of them feel like something is wrong with Alvin, but I don't feel that way. I agree with you. I just think that you got to learn how to use him in the right ways. And I just think over the last couple of years, they haven't. They've been kind of using him almost like as like that power back, and they really been shying away from the things that have made him special and one of the best running backs in the league. But there's a division among Saints fans, B-Mac. You got some Saints fans that feel like the Saints have to kind of show them that they're worthy of their support, and then you have some that are very optimistic. Like, I mean, when you think about a team as a former player, what are your thoughts on when you have a coach that kind of struggles a little bit, and it kind of feels like maybe they're not doing what's best for the team? Do guys like in the locker room, do they sense that? Is there talk among the locker room? How does that make players feel?
You don't trust the coach?
Mm.
Simple. You don't trust the coach. If you feel like the coach is not putting you in positions to be successful, now you're questioning everything he's telling you to do.
Right.
And that's not a good situation to be in when you're trying to compete in the National Football League.
Right.
That's where coaches lose the locker room. I used Josh McDaniels earlier when we were talking,
right,
because it's almost like a similar direction with who he was and getting the opportunity to be a head coach for the second time and then squandering it away.
right.
And I'm using him as an example as well for our viewers, because when you lose the locker room, that's when you start to see a lack of production on the football field. So think about this example with Josh McDaniels with the Raiders a year ago. It seemed like they were going in the wrong direction, couldn't get anything right. They fired Josh McDaniels, and I'm not an advocate for someone getting fired, no. But I understand the business of the National Football League as well. But when they parted ways with him, the same team, same players, you saw a difference in the energy and production.
Right.
Because those guys believed more in Antonio than they believed in Josh McDaniels.
Yep.
It's no different. I always utilize examples that can resonate to most fans, because most fans have not participated in a team-related sport where you can understand the demographics of an entire locker room. And you have some fans that have, but for the fans that never have, whatever your 9 to 5 is, you have a boss that's kind of the overseer of everything. If you don't trust that boss, you're going to kind of question internally everything he's telling you to do.
Right.
Or everything she's telling you to do, because you don't trust that they have sound leadership that can put you in a position to be successful. So if you're second guessing what that boss is telling you, just like a head coach of a football team, now you're going to second guess you as an employee to go out and do what you're supposed to do, because you don't trust the directions that you just received from whoever it is that's giving you the directions.
Yeah,
that's how it is in the locker room.
Yeah. Dang.
But a head coach.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. I mean, but there is a little bit of a division among Saints fans, but I mean, hopefully they can turn it around. Like I said, they got a new offensive coordinator and Clint Kubiak. They're trying to look to be more of a run dominant type team, and maybe that'll help out just a tad bit. But we can move on. Talk a little bit about some of the draft picks that they have. They decided to go get Tala'ise Fuaga out of Oregon State, a really good offensive lineman. And if you've been watching the New Orleans Saints, they've been having some issues on the offensive line. What is your assessment on a player like Fuaga, and what can he bring to the New Orleans Saints?
A sense of nastiness. This was the draft of offensive linemen. That's why we saw so many come out, get drafted early in the first round, because there were so many offensive linemen that played the game the right way. And Fuaga is a prime example of that in regards to fundamentally sound, TJ, and he plays with a sense of nastiness. And for the Saints, that's a big need because the left side it's been not up, more down than anything.
Right.
You got Ramczyk on the right side. Since you lost Armstead to Miami, you still been trying to figure things out on the left side. So with Fuanga, you draft him to be that anchor on the left side and a guy that can be a starter for you a decade plus. You know what I mean? And I think he has the skill set. He has the talent. So I love that pick. I felt like going the offensive line direction was huge for New Orleans because if you can get a guy like Fuanga, who's not a one-trick pony, you know how sometimes you might draft a guy early to play on the offensive line, and his skill sets, he might be stronger in pass pro than run blocking.
Right.
You rarely get a guy who's equally dominant in both phases, pass pro and run blocking. Fuanga is that type of guy. You know what I mean? You talk about Kubiak and the mentality that they're trying to incorporate offensively now being more run-oriented. I mean, this is a guy you can say, let's go to the left side, and we know he's gonna knock somebody off their shoes, and he's gonna give us a lane. And he wants to continue to do that because if you go back and look at his college tape, at Oregon State, they ran that peel.
Yeah, they did.
They ran it.
A lot.
They ran it, man. That was an offense compared to most modern day college offenses where they go tempo, throw the football around, a lot of 10 personnel, 4 wide receivers, one back. No, they were more generic, 12 personnel, 2 tight ends, 2 wide receivers, 1 running back, and they were coming downhill. So I love seeing that, from offensive linemen and the collegiate side of things because you don't see that a lot when it comes to the scheme. So I applaud the Saints. That was based on where the Saints were. Of course, I was thinking about maybe secondary, maybe cornerback, opposite of Lattimore. But I don't have an issue with Fuanga going in the first round.
Yeah, I mean, but speaking of cornerbacks, I mean, they ended up getting a really good cornerback. What a lot of people felt should have been a first rounder in Kool-Aid McKinstry. And I'm asking you this because I mean, you're a former cornerback. There's been talk about Marshawn Lattimore. And, a little bit of dissension, between he and Dennis Allen. And, there's been trade talks about Marshawn Lattimore. And, when you draft a guy like Kool-Aid McKinstry in the second round, it's going to have that talk, a little bit more louder. So my thoughts to you, about this whole situation, my question is to you is, what do you think about Kool-Aid McKinstry 1? And what do you think about the Saints possibly? I don't know. It's been rumors that they could possibly trade Marshawn Lattimore. What do you feel about that?
I'll answer the latter question first.
Okay.
No. Oh, what are we doing? Why? Marshawn Lattimore is a CB1 for sure. Yeah. He's a guy who's a tone setter in the back end. He's a guy that you can say, when you've seen Mike Evans twice a year, go follow Mike Evans.
All right.
And you're not a liability. When you talk about Drake London for Atlanta, they're hoping he can emerge to be that wide receiver 1. Go follow Drake. We're not even worrying about it. Right? Deontay Johnson with Carolina. Go follow. We're not even worried about it. Man, Marshawn Lattimore, man, he is New Orleans Saints football, bro. He plays it the right way. He plays with a sense of I don't care who I'm going against. It's my job to really kick you in the mouth.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So that's number one. No, whatever the issue is, if it is an issue, if it is, these are all rumors or allegations, whatever the case may be. If there is an issue between a head coach and your star corner, find a way to rectify that, get everything squandered out of the way. No need of any distractions and keep them in the building. Now, first, when it comes to Kool-Aid McKinstry, first round talent for sure. The thing that I think with Kool-Aid, because you remember, TJ, as we got prepared for the collegiate season last year, the month of July and August, most people felt like Kool-Aid was the best cornerback in college football.
That's true.
Most people felt like he was the number 1 guy.
Yep.
Now, throughout the season, he lost a little bit of that leverage and then, of course, kind of got surpassed by his teammate Anterion Arnold.
Yeah.
Then we come and receive the information at the combine. He had a fractured bone in his foot. So when I watch Kool-Aid collegiately, now, number 1, he didn't get tested a lot. You know what I mean? They didn't come at him a lot. Yeah. Deservedly so because he was that type of player. Right. But when they came at him, he stood up. but he just didn't give you what you thought you would see. Not saying he played bad, but it was almost like something wasn't right.
Mm.
I think he was hurt during the season.
Really?
And the reason why I say that, TJ, is this. How are you healthy during the season? The entire season, remember, they made it into collegiate playoffs.
Right.
You lost to Michigan. Then you instantly started preparing for the pre-draft process, getting ready for the combine. And then once you get to Indy, which was in early February, I'm sorry, the middle of February, late February, now you got a fractured bone.
Yeah.
So I believe he was dealing with some type of ailment already during the season, and he just fought through it. Then he gets to Indy, couldn't run because of the fracture. And then, of course, when he did run during his pro day, he still ran 4.47. I fractured my foot at Florida State. I went through that injury. I had surgery. I got a screw in my foot right now.
Wow.
It takes time. It takes time. So when I heard Kool-Aid ran a 4.47, I automatically said, just knowing that injury and being through and going through that injury when I was at Florida State, if he was fully healthy, because he wasn't fully healthy, but he was healthy enough to run and go through his drill. I believe if he was fully healthy, he'd run a 4.39, 4.41 easily. Because if you can run a 4.47 coming off of that injury weeks prior, who knows what you can run if you were fully healthy, but you had to give him something.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that he's extremely talented, but I mean, Marshawn Lattimore is just a whole nother beast. I just think about that secondary and what it was before he got to New Orleans. I mean, he has been good and been one of the best corners in the league since he's gotten to the league. He was the defensive rookie of the year. And, I mean, he really does a good job no matter who you put him on. You know that you're going to get the best effort out of Marshawn. So I agree with you. I think that it would be a mistake if they were to let him go. I mean, I like Paulson Adebo. I think he took steps forward last year, but I don't think that there's a cornerback on the Saints roster that is as good as Marshawn Lattimore. My final question about the New Orleans Saints is about Spencer Rattler, the 5th-round pick out of South Carolina. He comes to New Orleans with a lot of fanfare. Of course, we know about him being a number 1 rated high school player, going to Oklahoma, transferring to South Carolina. We know about the arm talent. We know about all of the talent that comes with him at the quarterback position. But Saints fans are looking at him as the possible future of the franchise. Can you see that?
Yeah, I can see that. And the reason why I believe he could become that guy is because we saw a kid that matured. You talk about to whom much is given, much is expected. Coming out of high school, he was like the next great quarterback, and they handled him as such. And when he went to Oklahoma, it was almost like, I know I'm the next best thing since sliced bread, and it's already there for me. And I think going through some adversity on the football field that led to him transferring humbled him a lot. And you saw a different player at South Carolina, a player that embraced leadership. You know what I mean? And we saw Spencer do more with less at South Carolina. And I know people saying, well, he threw to a 1st-round wide receiver in Xavier Legette. What did Legette do before Spencer got to South Carolina?
That's a good point. That's a good point.
That's the thing I don't understand with some quarterbacks is that when it comes to this draft process, some quarterbacks, TJ, get penalized for quote unquote throwing to NFL like wide receivers. And some quarterbacks don't. Like, they didn't penalize Joe Burrow when he threw to all pro wide receivers while at LSU. While he handed the football off to another 1st-round running back behind him, and he had another outstanding pro tight end to throw the football to as well. They didn't penalize Joe Burrow. So don't penalize guys like Michael Penix or a Spencer Rattler when you see their top pass catcher is a guy that got drafted extremely high. Because Spencer Rattler was able to unleash something in Legette's game that the other quarterbacks couldn't do. So I love seeing what I saw from Spencer at South Carolina. Another thing, he's a tough kid. He got beat up. He got beat up a lot. But he got beat up a lot behind that offensive line. He never backed down. You know what I mean? So that was a humbling experience, something that he needed to get. And also, too, getting drafted where he got drafted at. You know what I mean? I thought he would get drafted earlier than going in the 5th round, right? 5th round? That's another humbling experience. So now you get a kid, TJ, who comes into your building already going through adversity when he transferred from Oklahoma to South Carolina, had a real good resurgence of a career at South Carolina, and then getting drafted in the 5th round.
Right.
Like, he keep his head on straight, learn as much as possible from the older guys in the room and just understand what it takes to be a pro. Yeah, I could see him, being the future of the franchise, at the quarterback position, because, let's keep it real. Derek Carr is closer to the end of his career than the beginning.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Derek Carr, I can see him playing another good 3 or 4 years. Who knows? When you look at quarterbacks now, the age demographic, quarterbacks are playing closer to 40, but it's up to the personal individual. But outside of that, you would think Spencer Rattler could be that guy whenever Derek Carr might say, you know what, in a few years from now, enough is enough, or move on.
Yeah. He has great talent. And I think that the New Orleans Saints could possibly look at him as the future. I still feel like, Derek Carr starting for a year or two, it probably will help Spencer Rattler be able to learn how to be a pro, maybe get some of those mental reps. And when his opportunity comes, he'll be able to knock it out the park, hopefully. You mentioned Michael Penix, B-Mac. Michael Penix, it was a shocker, right? I mean, everybody thought the Falcons may go pass rush. They had some issues, rushing the quarterback. People thought they were going to get maybe Jarrett Verse or Dallas Turner, but instead they went after Michael Penix after paying Kirk Cousins in the offseason. First off, I'm pretty sure on draft night, you felt like a lot of people, you were shocked. But when you look at Michael Penix, I don't think anybody should look at him and be upset with him. I mean, he's a talented guy. What are your thoughts on Michael Penix?
Man, I love Michael Penix as a quarterback. When you talk about just a natural thrower of the football, he got it. He got it. He the last 2 years, name me another quarterback that has been better than Michael Penix the last 2 years. Caleb Williams had a great year in 2022. 2023 wasn't as great, but it was good. Like Jaden Daniels had an unbelievable year in 2023. 2022 wasn't as great. 2022, 2023, Michael Penix was putting up video game-like numbers. And it's just a natural tendency that he has. So when I watch quarterbacks and I scout quarterbacks, TJ, I watch them as a former defender. And I always reflect back to my NFL days, the quarterbacks that gave all of us issues. Like just they had a natural ability of just being a striker of the football with whatever collapsed, the pocket collapsed and didn't matter. And Michael Penix, great arm strength, super accurate, and his anticipatory skills. That's the thing. Like anticipating where your receiver is going and throwing him into that direction. That's huge. So for me, when Atlanta did that, it shocked the entire football world, all of the fans. But if you're telling me, if Atlanta had, after they did their due diligence, the entire pre-draft process and studying him, talking to him, seeing him throw in person, watching all the tape, when they finalized their entire draft board, if they said based on what they gathered, he's the best, he's the QB1.
Yeah. I agree with that.
If they said that, TJ, we just invested, buku bread in Kurt. But we know Kurt he's 36. So if we're telling us what we see, man, we can't pass up on that. And then also, too, of course, more information comes out after the draft. It stated that if Atlanta didn't take Penix, Minnesota's going to take Penix. if Minnesota didn't take Penix, the Raiders are going to take Penix. So clearly, other teams were feeling like Atlanta was feeling, even though Atlanta had, a more desirable quarterback option already in house. Atlanta was like, no, we ain't passing up on this. And then also, too, being a New Orleans Saints fan, they said Terry Fontenot was still having nightmares for passing up on, was it Pat Mahomes, right?
Patrick Mahomes, Not aggressively moving up for Patrick Mahomes.
Even though you had Drew at the time, Drew still was playing good football, but Drew was closer to the end than the beginning. Not aggressive enough. was like, I want to, but you know what? Because who did the Saints draft that year in the first?
They got Lattimore. They got Lattimore because Kansas City moved up to 10 because they knew more than likely the Saints were going to get Patrick Mahomes, and they jumped one spot ahead of the Saints, and they picked Patrick Mahomes.
and Lattimore has worked out phenomenal for the Saints. But quarterback, cornerback, you know who needs more.
Right.
So if you're Terry Fontenot, you already went through this whole scenario where you saw everything that you gathered when Pat Mahomes was coming out like, yo, forget what everybody else saying. We got to go up and get him.
Yeah.
And that same type scenario surfaced in this year's draft where you didn't even have to move up.
Yep.
You're like, man, I'm not doing this again because if they drafted, well, who knows what would have happened, but just Pat Mahomes could have been New Orleans Saints. Who, it's a lot of what else, but you get where I'm going.
Right. Well, I can tell you more than likely Sean Payton would probably still be the Saints coach.
Oh, question.
He wasn't going to leave.
Yeah, no question. That's why Andy Reid's sticking around as long as possible. Man, I got that guy. Come on, man. Why would I leave?
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, but I agree with what you're saying. I mean, Michael Penix is an incredible talent, and you can't pass that up, even though, I mean, I'm pretty sure they still believe in Kirk Cousins, but, Kirk Cousins coming off an Achilles injury, you mentioned his age, and we seen the Atlanta Falcons not having a succession plan for Matt Ryan and what that has been over the last couple of years, and they don't want to be in that position. So I can understand how silly that may seem to some, but if something happens to Kirk Cousins, then Terry Fontenot looks like the best GM in football.
Right. And then also, too, TJ, next year's draft is not as quarterback heavy as we see it right now. And if you're Atlanta with Kirk Cousins, you probably won't have a record bad enough to be in the top 10 next year.
Yeah.
So you're anticipating success. So you're like, you know what? Let's take advantage of this position that we're in to go ahead and address the most important position for the future. And guess what? Michael Penix doesn't mind sitting and learning.
Yeah.
But he is going to compete. But he understands I'm coming into a situation where we already got a guy. Mm-hmm. It's my job to be a teammate to push him, learn from him, and just be ready whenever my number is called.
Yeah. And, he's going to get quite a few reps in preseason because that the Falcons aren't going to try to use Kirk Cousins. I mean, him being a veteran, him coming off the Achilles injury and the money that they paid him. So, Michael Penix is going to get some reps in preseason. So hopefully this won't be one of those situations where, the fan base sees him and all of a sudden, the outcry happens. We know Arthur Blank, he listens to the fan base, He listens to
the fan base. I shared this with an agent I was talking to. I said, well, initially when the Falcons drafted Michael Penix, they drafted Michael Penix, for the plan moving forward after Kirk Cousins.
Right.
It's similar to what we saw when Russell got drafted to Seattle when they just paid Matt Flynn all that money. Yep. They drafted Russell as a plan for the future. But when Russell got in camp, it was like, oh, all right. I know we drafted we paid Flynn, but man, it's hard keeping this young fella off the football field. Remember, Russell was the starter once the season kicked in because of the preseason play and how well he looked. Yep. So we got to see how it plays out, but I'm okay with what Atlanta did. It surprised everybody. And, most fans, as you know, they want to see their first round play right now, the first round pick.
Yeah. I mean, because it symbolizes hope. It symbolizes a change. And, like I said, I mean, I'm interested to see how this is going to shape up. But we move on to the Carolina Panthers. The Carolina Panthers had the worst record in football. Like they had one of the worst records. Don't have any primetime games. But they do have a new head coach in Dave Canales. Can Dave Canales help the Carolina Panthers get back on track?
I think so. I think if Dave could provide the same hope that he did in Tampa with Baker Mayfield, that definitely could help out. Bryce Young did not look like Bryce Young that we watched at Alabama. Now, everyone keeps jumping on him like he was solely the issue. His offensive line was atrocious.
Yeah.
A year ago. Offensive line was bad. Adam Thielen was a great addition for him, and he showed up, but you need more than Adam Thielen. Right. Miles Sanders didn't really deliver like they thought he would based on them paying him from Philly. So there was a lot going on that halted I think, Bryce Young's development. So now, when it comes to this new regime, they got to find a way to unlock Bryce Young.
Right.
You got to
Yeah.
find a way.
Yeah.
And I'll say this, TJ, usually you don't see a second-year quarterback who was a part of a bad team his first year have high expectations in year two
Yeah.
because it's almost a rebuild. But for Bryce Young, how the timer is set on these young quarterbacks, you got 3 years.
Mm.
You got
Yep.
3 years to show like you can do something.
Yep.
Because if you don't, they already have an accession plan for you moving forward.
Yeah. Do you still believe in Bryce Young? I mean, it's like they were not a good football team, and they didn't do a lot of things to help him last season. The offensive line was in shambles. The only wide receiver he really had that was reliable was Adam Thielen. Do you still believe in Bryce Young? Can he be the quarterback that Carolina needs him to be?
I do. I believe the kid that we watched at Alabama is still there. He got beat up. Clearly, his confidence probably was a bit shaken, but I still believe he can be productive.
Right.
And this is a very, very telling year because Carolina didn't do a lot because they didn't have a lot of resources via the draft, but they've added talent, more talent than what they had last year. You still got Adam Thielen there, who I think is more than a serviceable wide receiver. You traded for Deontay Johnson, who was a wide receiver one. You drafted Xavier Legette. Hopefully, you can get something out of Jonathan Mingo, another big body type receiver. So when you talk about those three guys, just solely those three guys, right?
Right.
You got Deontay, Adam Thielen, and Xavier Legette. Those three guys are better options than what he had last year, collectively speaking, right? You got Jatavion Sanders, the tight end from Texas as well, a very, very athletic guy. I'm still concerned at the running back room.
Right.
Chuba Hubbard, Jonathan Brooks from Texas coming off an ACL injury. Like, how healthy will he be? You still have Miles Sanders. So that's an area that I'm more concerned about the running back room than the wide receiver room.
Yeah.
Because any young quarterback, TJ, you got to have at least a decent running game that kind of keep a balanced attack offensively.
Yeah. I mean, I look at this team last year, they were not very good, but the defense was pretty good last season. But you don't have Brian Burns anymore. You decide to trade him to New York. You bring in Jadeveon Clowney, but at this stage, Jadeveon Clowney, I don't feel like is an upgrade over Brian Burns. So this is a team that's still trying to figure it out. I think that they're going to be better than they were last season. I mean, that's not saying a lot. I mean, they were the worst team in football. But
yeah, so you're giving them 4 wins this year. They had 2 last year. You're giving them another extra 2.
Yeah, I would say I'll give them at least 5. I give them at least 5 this season. I think that Dave Canales is a smart guy. I think from what I've seen him do with Baker Mayfield last season, I mean, and also with Geno Smith out there in Seattle, he has a reputation of being able to turn it around and getting the best out of quarterbacks. But the final question is about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and, Baker Mayfield. Like I said, Dave Canales moves on from Carolina, to Carolina. And Baker Mayfield now has a new offensive coordinator, Lynn Cohen. Baker Mayfield took a step forward, kind of changed the thoughts. A lot of people thought that he was on his way out. But do you think that Baker Mayfield can actually capitalize on what he built last season, or will you see a step back? I mean, B-Mac, we've seen this. When a quarterback lose their coordinator, they have a tendency of taking a step back. I mean, you think about Josh Allen when Brian Daboll left. You've seen an uptick in interceptions. We've seen Jalen Hurts. When Shane Steichen left, he took a little bit of a step back. Will Baker Mayfield suffer the same fate as some of those quarterbacks?
I don't think so because he was only with Canales for 1 year. So throughout that process, they were kind of learning on the fly, both individuals, the coach and the quarterback. So it wasn't like he was coached by Canales for quite some time.
Right.
And I think also, too, Baker understands this is the last opportunity. You know what I mean? You just earned a new contract extension, deserving so, but this is your last opportunity to show that you can just be consistent. So for Tampa, all you need is a consistent quarterback. And I'll say this, one reason to be optimistic about Baker and Tampa is they played their best football in the playoffs.
Yeah.
They were playing real good ball. And then,
Yeah.
yes, they lost to Detroit in the second round, but TJ, they were right there. They
Mm-hmm.
were right there. That game, I mean, there were a play here or there. If they make a play, they win and they advance.
Yeah.
So, and I think in the playoffs is what we started to see was the team was like, Baker is our guy. We're going to rally around Baker. You know what I mean? He has that sense of moxie when he's playing, the fire I love. Some people might not like it, but it's relatable to the guys in the locker room. And also,
Yeah.
too, he got some talent around him. I think,
Yeah.
White should be a much better runner for the football. We know who Mike Evans is. He's a book to get at least 1,000 yards. Chris Godwin got to stay healthy. So they got some talent. I love the offensive line. You still got Tristan Wirfs and things like that. So this is a team, when you look at the NFC South, they're the team that everyone else is chasing because they won it last year. And they've had success with this regime when it comes to coaching.
Yeah.
Like, you talked about the change in coaching throughout the entire division. New Orleans got a new coordinator, right? And I understand Tampa has a new offensive coordinator as well, but Todd Bowles been around the block for quite some time. He's had success. He's won a Super Bowl,
Yeah.
right? You look at Atlanta, an entire new coaching regime. The same can be said for Carolina. So Tampa is the one team in the division that has more solidified coaching. When you talk about being in the building, being around this team for quite some time. And I think that's why they're the lead dog when it comes to NFC South in regards to potentially being the best team in the division once again, and everyone else is chasing.
Yeah. So it sounds like you have Tampa repeating as the NFC South champions, correct?
I'm not going to say that just yet. If I had to give a ranking right now, I would have Tampa number one.
Mm-hmm.
But my close second is Atlanta. I'm sorry, TJ. I know you're a New Orleans fan, and this is the Saints podcast, but Atlanta is my number two. And the reason why is I believe more in Raheem Morris as a head coach than Dennis Allen.
Yeah.
That's number one. Number two, I believe Atlanta has more talent on the offensive side than the New Orleans Saints. Now, granted, a lot of their players offensively they haven't unlocked that surge of talent, but they have it. And I love Bijan Robinson. Bijan Robinson is the best back in the division. And I think the consensus would agree with me when it comes to that, right? So when you factor in Kirk Cousins and what he's done, I would have Atlanta close to Tampa because of those reasons. But then the main factor is the head coaching. The head coaching. And I'll say this too. New Orleans, either your fan base, I don't have the schedule. Hold on, let me pull up the Saints schedule. I'm gonna give the New Orleans Saints fans something to look forward to right here, right, TJ?
Yeah.
And I'm gonna say this right now. By week 7 of the Saints schedule, either New Orleans Saints fans will be fired up, optimistic, or they already calling for a lot of change in the organization. And the reason why, look at the first 4 games. You got Carolina that, even though Carolina is trying to change things, that has to be a must win for New Orleans.
Yeah.
You cannot start off 0-1, losing to Carolina in the Dome, and it's a divisional game. So that's very, very tricky. Outside of that, you got to travel to Dallas. Dallas has always been known to be a double-digit win team. You travel to Dallas. That's a playoff caliber team. Okay, cool. Same can be said for Philly. And then you transition to another Division 4 in Atlanta, the end of September. So your first 4 ball games, you have 2 divisional teams. One at home, one at away. Best case scenario for New Orleans, if you're 2-2, you feel okay.
Yeah.
You cannot be 1-3.
I agree.
You cannot be 1-3. Because if you're 1-3 and you go to Kansas City, which is a Monday night game, and then after that you got Tampa.
Yeah. Hey, I did a prediction show, B-Mac, on Bleacher Report. Like, and when you talk about, me being a Saints fan, I'm a realist about it. I have the Saints with a losing record. Like, I got the fan base mad at me right now. But I mean, you're basing, this on what you've seen over the last couple of years, and the confident level in Dennis Allen. And honestly, my confidence is very, very low when it comes to him as being a head coach of the Saints. Now, all this could change if you start winning games, but that remains to be seen. So you got to base your judgment on what you've seen already. And I mean, you had one of the easiest schedules last season and you finished 9-8, and you kind of had to scratch and claw to that. So, I mean, honestly, I would say, I would look at Tampa as being a division winner. Wouldn't shock me if Atlanta won the division. Honestly, it wouldn't shock me if the Saints won the division if they actually lived up to their potential. But I can understand why people would say that, they'll probably be second or third in this division.
And another thing too, for the Saints fans that are tuning in, checking us out, that have no bias when it comes to this question, no bias. Just as a fan of football, if you were to rank the head coaches in the NFC South, where would you rank Dennis Allen? That's a valid question.
Yeah.
Now, mind you, you have two guys in the division. Well, one, this is his first rodeo as a head coach.
Right.
Raheem has done it, not in a full capacity, but he's done it. But just based on what you've seen, like getting ready for this season, if you had to rank the head coaches in the NFC South, where would you rank Dennis Allen?
Yeah. I mean, you will have to have him, second to last or last, and honestly, you would probably rank him second to last because you haven't seen Dave Canales as a head coach. So
thank you.
That'll probably
best case, you would have him third.
Yeah, at best. But like I said, if you change the narrative by winning football games and actually taking this schedule, like, to me, this would probably be his most impressive season. Like, I'm talking about the first season, you had high expectations because the team looked like, they were a playoff caliber team.
Yep.
The second season, you kind of changed some things around, but you still had some Sean Payton layovers. This season, you basically got a complete overhaul. This team is built in your image now. So if he can go out there and he can perform, I guarantee you people will get on board. But right now, you have question marks about him. And as long as you have these question marks, B-Mac, I mean, you got to evaluate accordingly. It's not personal. I mean, you have to be optimistic. I mean, you have to be realistic about this. And, if you're a Saints fan, you have to be realistic and understand that you have to win in order for people to get on board.
No question.
Yeah. Yeah, but B-Mac, thank you so much, man. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for stopping by the State of the Saints podcast. Always a pleasure to talk to you, my man. Let everybody know how they can get in touch with you.
Man, social media, same name for all the handles, BMac_sports talk, as TJ said during the intro. Catch me on CBS Sports HQ, talking college ball, talking NFL ball. There's a lot to talk about with the schedule just being released last night, as well as we get ready for, giving out our prediction on what teams will do when it comes to record-wise. And it's always a pleasure, TJ, man. You do a great, phenomenal job. Saints fans, man, keep tuning in to my guy, man. He keeps it real, as he should. Right?
Right.
And he's going to be very, very informative of what the Saints is doing. And like I said, first 4 ball games, going to tell you all you need to know about the Saints.
Yep. And
you can't be 1-3.
Yeah.
2-2, I think the fans will accept 2-2. But one thing they can't accept and can't tolerate is being 1-3 when you play Carolina, Dallas, Philly, and Atlanta. You can't be 1-3 in that 4-game stretch. No, sir.
Yep. And the best thing about this schedule, B-Mac, you find out early what the New Orleans Saints are going to be and who they are, because I mean, it's murderous road just to kick it off. After that Carolina game, you got some very credible football teams that you have to face. So we're going to find out who the Saints really are in 2024. But once again, man, thank you so much for being a part of the State of the Saints podcast. Man, I'll catch up with you later, man. Take care.
Yes, sir. Take care.